Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HIT 210. We are on week 4, and we are looking at chapters 8 through 10. Chapter 8 is on TRICARE and Veterans Health Care. Chapter 9 is Workers' Comp, and Chapter 10 is Disability and Social Security Disability, to be more specific. If you take a look at our syllabus, we are looking at unit objectives 9.1.1 through 9.1.7 and 9.5.1 through 9.5.3. If you want to follow along in your book, we are on page 137. Just a reminder, you're going to want to make sure that you're familiar with the key terms. Those are the ones that are in bright blue, bolded in your book. So what do they want us to really focus on in this chapter? If you look at the objectives, they're the exact same things that are on this slide. Excuse me, they include the history of TRICARE, who's eligible for TRICARE, the circumstances when a non-availability statement is necessary, authorized versus non-authorized providers, benefits of the TRICARE Select program, the TRICARE fiscal year, managed care features of TRICARE Prime, and enrollment, primary care managers, pre-authorization payments. Those who enroll in TRICARE Prime Remote and what they need to be aware of. TRICARE Reserve Select, TRICARE Retired Reserve, and TRICARE Young Adult programs, all very similar. Then we want to talk a little bit about TRICARE for Life benefits and those who are eligible for that, as well as those who are eligible for TRICARE Plus. We'll talk a little bit about the fact that supplemental health care program is available, and there is a TRICARE hospice program. We'll also talk about individuals who are eligible for the Veterans Health Administration programs, which is known as CHAMP VA, and their enrollments and pre-authorization process. And then we'll conclude with processing a claim for whoever is covered by TRICARE or one of their programs, talk about the components of a TRICARE summary payment voucher, and then list the components of a CHAMP VA explanation of benefits document. And all of this is in your book. We're essentially just going to wander through your book with these slides. So the history of TRICARE talks about how in 1966 CHAMPUS was created, and over time CHAMPUS transitioned to become TRICARE, and TRICARE is now what we would be most familiar with. There are two major regions of TRICARE in the United States, and they are managed by regional contractors. And I'll come back to eligibility, so hang on there. And I guess they're not going to really cover that. But anyway, there are two regions, and one is east, one is west. If you're talking about Iowa and Minnesota, they are part of the west, and their national contractor is Health Net Federal Services. If you're talking about Wisconsin, which is part of the TRICARE East, it is covered by the regional contractor Humana Military. So as you can see, managing these programs and their billing and all of that has been contracted out. So it's either Health Net Federal Services to the west or TRICARE to the east, or I'm sorry, Humana to the east. Who is eligible for TRICARE programs? It's active duty service members, eligible family members of active duty service members, military retirees and eligible family members, surviving eligible family members of deceased active or retired service members, wards and pre-adoptive children, former spouses of active or retired service members, but those must meet certain requirements, family members of active duty service members who were court-martialed or separated from their families for abuse, abused spouses and children of service members, spouses and children of NATO nation representatives, reservists and National Guard members activated for 30 or more consecutive days, disabled beneficiaries under 65 years with Medicare A and B, Medicare eligible beneficiaries in TRICARE for Life, Those are all eligible for TRICARE programs. Something that you probably need to be aware of is there is a computerized database in which all TRICARE eligible persons have to be enrolled, and this is called DEERS, Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. And it talks about this in the middle of page 139. TRICARE claims processors check DEERS before processing claims to verify beneficiary eligibility. A TRICARE beneficiary may check his or her status by contacting the nearest personnel office of any branch of the service or by calling the toll-free number of the DEERS Center. A non-availability statement is certification from a military hospital when it cannot provide care. And then this, in December of 2003, it became no longer necessary for those who wish to receive treatment as inpatients at a civilian hospital who lived within a catchment area. However, a non-availability statement is still required for non-emergency inpatient mental health care services. So it's just one exception to be aware of. Talks about what is a catchment area below that, and then we go into identification cards. An ID card is required for all dependents over the age of 10. They are not limited to using network providers for medically or psychologically necessary services. The care is usually sought at a military hospital closest to home or identified through the healthcare finder. Authorized providers must be used. Pre-authorization is necessary for specialty care, hospitalization, and certain procedures, and deductibles and co-payments apply. Notice that this is true of all TRICARE programs. The TRICARE fiscal year follows the federal fiscal year, which begins October 1st and ends September 30th. So, for instance, we are in the federal fiscal year of 2021. It started October 1st. It will end September 30th. The fiscal year, the federal fiscal year for 2022 will start October 1st of 2021 and end September 30th of 2022. In terms of TRICARE programs, it talks about authorized providers of health, and it goes through and defines who's an authorized provider, who's a network provider, who's a non-network provider. What does it mean if you're a participating provider? What if it means if you're a non-participating provider? This is all on page 139, and I'm going to encourage you to read through your book for that information. Then it breaks down into TRICARE Select. Oh, and stepping back, I want to step back to this slide for a second. If you look on page 140 at the bottom, there's figure 8.2, and it talks through what all those types of providers are. And I think that visual is much easier to kind of understand or reconcile rather than just reading through the material. And I know you need to read through it, but that figure may help you put it into a more organized way of remembering it. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about TRICARE Select versus TRICARE Prime versus all the other TRICARE programs. If you go into billing, you'll learn all of this, particularly if you have a high volume of retired military individuals. So I'm not going to cover that, but you did have the slide a few back that talked about what is required under all TRICARE programs. So I'm going to encourage you to go back to that. I will bring this up just so that you can see it on the screen. Notice that most of these have a managed care component, and they're just like the third-party payers, managed care companies that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So as you're thinking about this, just be thinking about managed care and how they handle those policies. And just as with any insurance, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, or managed care, or TRICARE, or VA, you're going to take a look at their ID card. You're going to call a number. You're going to verify what coverage they have. You're going to figure out what items need to be pre-authorized and all of that. You would do that for any patient. So the Veterans Health Administrative Program was started in 1973. It's now called the Veterans Health Administration, or the VA, and talks about who is eligible. Again, it's very similar to TRICARE. So now we're up to claims procedure. And this is on page 149 in your book, where it talks about regional contractors, and we talked about those. And then it goes into a lot of the information that's behind claims procedures. And I'm going to again lead you back to your book to review this information. I will say that almost all the claims are going to be electronic, so we will learn how to fill out a CMS 1500 form, but really, if you're involved at all, it'll be electronically. And of course, any of this can change. So even though we're looking at this information, already it's a couple of years old, and you would want to go out and check on it anyway, to make sure that it's still accurate. One thing to note, that TRICARE or CHAMP VA are not billed until after someone's workers' compensation benefits are exhausted. And this talks about the explanation of benefits after the claim is submitted. And this starts on page 151 in your book. And then, of course, they do quality assurance, and there's opportunities for claims inquiries and appeals. If you look at page 152 in your book, it's going to give you an example of a TRICARE summary payment voucher, just so you can take a look at that. And then there's some information on page 153 about how to understand an explanation of benefits. And that is it for Chapter 8. I'll be back with Chapter 9 shortly.